I really do believe that we've got something for you tonight. And I wanted to, I've been thinking about January, and I really wanted to hit a couple of things on the head in January and really just set us up for a great year. And realise that 2022 is a brand new year. And today, if we haven't already chosen yesterday, today and this year, we can choose to have a brand new start to our entire life. And it really is that serious. But I wanted to give you some information on how to get that new life and how to get going forward in that and how to really overcome it. But this is what I wanted to talk to you about. You know, we need to understand what is happening in the spirit realm. You see, we know a lot about what's happening in the natural, okay? Like the TV tells us, the internet tells us, YouTube tells us, all of this stuff is telling us what's happening in the natural. And most of those mediums are reporting on what's going in the world and what's going on in people's lives in the natural. But what about the spirit? You see, the spirit actually rules over the natural. And just as, the mind can say, or your soul can say, do you know what? As from this moment forward, or over this school holidays, or whatever you're choosing to do, you can say, I am not going to eat any more junk food. No more soft drink, no more junk food. I'm only going to eat healthy. How's that going for most of you? For me, it's not going very good at all. But that wasn't exactly, what I decided to do. But as you might think that's what you want to do, just as your body or your spirit or your mind might say, no more junk food to my body, that does not mean that the natural doesn't look at those hot chips and go, they're going to be good. The natural can pull them into another direction. And the spirit is supposed to rule over the natural. But you see what happens? What happens is that the spirit in most of us does not rule over our natural body. In fact, it actually gets flipped most of the time, where our natural body is actually ruling over our spirit, and the things that we want in the natural are actually ruling over our spirit man and over our mind and over the decisions that we want to make that we know are good for us, and it's actually reversing over our life. And I want to help you how to turn that back around. How to fix up this natural area and then the spirit area, and how to let the spirit realm rule over your life and not the natural man rule over your life. This is what fasting is all about. Now, listen, don't all panic. I'm not going to give you a message on fasting, okay, on the first Sunday of the year. But fasting in its essence is you saying, do you know what? I am deciding in my spirit not to eat, and therefore my body is going to come into submission to what my mind and my spirit is telling it what to do. Rather than the body saying, well, I want hot chips and I want ice cream and I want this and I want that, and I don't care what the mind wants or what the spirit wants. It's irrelevant because my flesh is in control, not my spirit man is in control. But we need to reverse that around. Now listen, if the body rules, we always end up in trouble, okay? Listen, it's not just with junk food. It's with addictions. It's with alcohol. It's with drugs. It's with TV. It's with internet. It's with lust. It's with anger. It's with too much gaming on your computer. It's with selfishness. It's with the love of money and everything that money can buy. It all leads to a couple of things: fights, arguments, wars, division, isolation, hate, big pharma, big government, COVID, and confusion. That's what happens when the flesh starts to rule over the world, and when the flesh starts to rule over your life, it all ends badly for us. And I want to help us today. I want to lay a foundation today that's going to help us understand about the natural and the spirit, and how to balance those two things out, and how to be not just a winner, but more than just achieve, more than just survive 2022. You know, there are two forces at work: good and evil, light and darkness, God and his angels, Lucifer and 1/3 of heaven helping him. Now, I know that we don't always talk about this stuff, but do you realize if we don't understand what's happening in the atmosphere and the spirit realm above us, then we are a slave to the natural and think there is no other way to go forward. Do you know what Revelations 12 says? This is what it says. Then, Revelations 12 verse 7, then war broke out in the heavens. This is talking about what has happened. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But they were not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray, was held down to earth, and his angels with him. Listen, this may be 101 to most people that have been around the church for a couple of years. But if you have never really understood what's happening with God and what's happening with the enemy, what's happening in the natural, what's happening in the spirit, what's happening in churches and what's happening down at the pub, what's happening when you feel to go this way with your flesh, but there's something inside of you saying, I really need to go that way, you have misunderstood that before we walked on planet Earth, there was an enemy up there, one of the archangels, called Lucifer, and he thought that he was better than God. He thought that he could do something and basically be equal to God or overthrow God or get rid of God. And a war broke out in heaven. And Lucifer and his angels, the ones that were in his gang, so to speak, fought against the archangel Michael and the guys that were with him. But the enemy Lucifer was not strong enough. And he was defeated and he was held down to earth. Then God created the world and put us in here, built us, created us in his own image. But he left us here on earth, confined to the natural, breathing oxygen, living in the body, having a spirit, yet living in the flesh, for a time called our life, to see whether we were going to rule with God and whether we were going to follow what he asked us to do, or whether we were going to let the enemy, who thought he was better than God, come in and rule and reign over our flesh and rule and reign over the world and cause destructions and wars and addictions and a whole bunch of other things that we see in the world today. But you know what the sad thing is? The sad thing is that it happens in the church. The church knows about God. The church has read the book. The church has read Revelations. The church knows there was a war. The church knows that Lucifer lost and 1/3 of heaven, demons, came down with him. The church knows that they're ruling around the world, seeing who they can destroy with addictions and problems and hassles and issues and division and all this sort of stuff. Yet we miss out on the teaching where the church is supposed to fully understand that God is greater than the enemy. God now lives in you, so we are greater than the enemy. And when it comes to that decision between the spirit and the flesh, all we have to do is reach out and hang on to God, and he will always take us through. He won in the beginning, he's winning in the middle, and he'll win at the end. You need to win at the beginning, win this year, and win for the rest of your life, because God has given us the answers to get through this thing. You know, John 10:10 says this, and it's really, really clear to me. It's one of my favourite verses, and I love preaching on it, but I just want to read it out to you today. John 10:10 says this: the thief, that's the enemy that we've spoken about, the thief comes to your life, to this world, only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But Jesus said, I've come that you may have life and have life to the fullest. You know, the enemy wants to steal your purpose that God has for you. Listen, make no mistake about it. If God has a call on your life, and he does for every single person that's born on this planet, the enemy is out to steal that call, to take that call away from you, to take God's gifts away from you, and to kill you if he can. If he can kill you in the natural, he'll do it. He'll do it with addictions, drug overdose, alcoholism. He'll do it with suicide. He'll mess up your brain. He will physically try and take you out. And if he can't physically take you out, then he will mentally and spiritually take you out and kill the spirit man or woman that God put on the inside of you to rule and reign in this thing called life. And we need to know what's happening up here to win down here. He will kill you and he will destroy your family. He will destroy everything that God has for you. He wants it out. Remember, you've got to think it through. He's up there thinking he's better than God. He has a fight with God. 1/3 of heaven fights the other 2/3 of heaven. He gets put down here. He's now confined to down here. He's lost his place in heaven. And then God makes this beautiful creation called men and women. And then all of a sudden, all the enemy wants to do is rob, kill, and destroy that very thing, the sons and daughters of God that's been put on this earth. He wants to destroy them. He wants to pull them down. He wants to wreck them. He wants to screw your life up and chuck it away like it's garbage. And we've got to realize that God is sitting up there in 2022 and saying, listen, guys, listen, co-side, you got to be reminded. Listen, whether you're the older generation or whether you're the younger generation or you're the generation in the middle, you got to be reminded that this stuff is going on around us all the time, and we can win, and we can get through it, and we will win, and we will get through it. But it just takes a little bit of knowledge to know how to pull this thing down and to be able to go forward. You know, I am starting a series over January, and I'm starting it tonight. And the thing that we're going to be talking about is the spirit realm. I want us to know how this works. Now, it might be a little bit teachy, and it might be a little bit like overload of information, but you can always go back and watch it on YouTube, go back and watch it online and pick up all the finer details, because this stuff will change your life. And today, I want to just tackle one thing, just one thing, and that's fear. I want to talk about fear. I want to talk about the spirit of fear. I want to talk about how the spirit of fear works, and I want to show you how to overcome it and how to beat this thing. You know, 2 Timothy 1:7 says this in the King James. It says, "For God did not give us a spirit of fear, but he gave us a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind." 2 Timothy 1:7 in the NIV, same verse, just different translation. It says this: "For God's spirit gave us for the spirit that God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline." You see, we do not fight flesh and blood. Ephesians 10 tells us this: "Finally, be strong. We're going to win. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power." Not yours. This is not about you being pumped up. This is not about you walking out here and going, you know what? I can just feel this thing. I'm gonna take this thing out. I'm gonna let my spirit man rule, and the enemy's not gonna get anywhere near me over 2020. No. It is God's power and it is God's strength. It is simply a matter of just submitting to God and his will on every area of your life, and the enemy has to run. It is not a competition, it's a choice. And I want to talk to you about how to walk through that and how to make that choice. It says here in verse 11, put on the full armor of God so you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Listen to me, young people, listen to me. The devil is scheming to take you down. The enemy is scheming of how he can pull you out. The enemy is working on ways to shut you down from being all that God has called you to do. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's not against the natural, but it's against rulers and against authorities and against the powers of this dark world and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Listen, I'm quoting a lot of scripture tonight, but I want to tell you something. This is solid foundation of 101 of how to walk with God and how to make sure that we win in this thing called life. And when you understand these principles, I'm telling you, you will win. Everybody say with me, I'm going to have a fantastic 2022. Say this, say, I am going to win in 2022. Say, I've got this. In 2022, I got this. I got this. Say it with me, I got this. We got this. I'm telling you, it's all in the book and we've got it. Here's some key words for you to just work on as we talk about fear. Number one is this. These are some key words. They're just words, okay? You can write them down or whatever, put them on your fridge. Fear, timid, shut down, and scared. Few words we're going to talk about. Number two, a few more words. Power of God, strength to win and overcome in 2020. Third thing I want to talk about, some words. Sound mind, self-discipline, a clear and healthy mind, mental stability, and self-control. Now, here's the thing. I can't give you a bunch of stories today. Now, the reason why I can't give you a bunch of stories today is because if I gave you stories, you're probably sitting next to someone that I'm telling the story about. And that never goes down well. If you're not sitting next to the person, then you may be that person. That never goes down well if I tell a story. And if you're watching online and you're not here and you're not with them and they're not next to them, you know, everyone is caught up in some kind of fear and I want to help us be able to get through this. But just as an example, okay, fear has affected us all in some way, okay? And I want to break this down. You see, but it's done everything. I'll give you, it's a short list. There's no names to these stories, okay? They're just examples, okay? I was going to ask permission from some of these people, but only these people would know. So anyway, I don't need to ask, so let's just move on. This fear that I know has stopped people from getting into elevators, going and parking their car underground, walking out of marriages, hurting their kids, not getting on a plane, getting caught up in every type of conspiracy, true or not, that's not the point, justifying every type of behaviour, including storming Capitol Hill, killing people, and burning down Parliament House. So it goes from things you would think, well, so what? That doesn't bother me, to things that we are watching on television. And all of these things, these people have made these choices, and I believe most of them is out of fear. Fear is something that can make you do things that you wouldn't normally do, or it's something that will stop you doing something that you should be doing. And if God did not give us a spirit of fear, then we need to make sure that we walk into this year without this thing. You know, here's a question for you. Is fear spirit or a natural emotion? Which one is it? Is fear something from the spirit, or is fear something, you know, that's just a natural emotion that we have? Let's dig into it, okay? Fear arises, I'm going to read some of this out to you just to get it 100% correct. But fear arises when there's a threat of harm, either physically, emotionally, or psychologically, whether it's real or imagined. It is a negative emotion and an important role in keeping us safe, as it mobilises us to cope with potential danger. Fear is a normal, natural response to a danger in our surroundings, okay? But the spirit of fear intends to keep you from fulfilling your destiny that God has put in your life. Now, let me just break this down just a little bit more. And I know you have to go back and watch this because you won't remember everything that I'm saying, because I'm teaching you something today, not just preaching you something. But 2 Timothy says this, 2 Timothy 1:7, okay? 2 Timothy 1:7 says this, for God did not give us a spirit of fear, and then goes into what we've talked about. But guess what Proverbs 1:7 says? That's 1:7 as well. It says this, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So we just can't blanket this thing out. We've got to realize, which part is the emotions that are keeping us safe, and which things and what spirit is stopping us from going forward into what God wants us to do. Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, Proverbs 1:7, but God did not give us a spirit of fear, 2 Timothy 1:7. So fear keeps us safe from danger, that is good. But fear also stops us from living our best life, that is bad. Now, you're tracking with me so far. I know I'm throwing out a lot of words here, but trust me, it's going to make a whole lot more sense when you watch it a second time. I want to give you 4 responses to fear, and I'm going to wrap this up because I really want to help us understand fear and how to keep away from it and how to not live under the spirit of fear, but yet understand that fear is good in certain circumstances. There are 4 responses to fear, and I want to just read them out to you and then comment on each one of them, okay? Now, let me just go a little bit technical for you for a moment, and I hope I pronounce this right, okay? But while the amygdala processes, that's part of your brain, the emotional experience, the frontal lobe and the prefrontal cortex controls things like our language and our impulse control. When we experience fear, our brain reroutes energy from the amygdala part of our brain, slowing down the process in other areas of our brain. This is why it is difficult to speak or to make rational decisions when we're afraid. When we experience fear and the algorithm is activated in our brain, it makes a quick decision about what to do next. Our brain's goal is to make a decision that will keep us safe. This choice will get us away from the perceived danger and minimize the harm. Now, the 4 things I want to talk to you about when this happens happen automatically. This is not a Bible terminology part of your brain of how the brain works. It's just how your brain works when fear comes around your life. And when the spirit of fear comes around your life, there is 4 distinct ways that we can react. Some are good and some are bad. And all 4 of them have a good side and a bad side. And I want to read them out to you today because I believe that as we just let this soak into us, we will really start to not just hear about not having a spirit of fear, understanding the natural and the spirit as we go into 2022, but why it actually works. The first fear is this, or the first response is fight. People say anger is fear in disguise. It sums up the fight response. When the brain perceives danger, it might choose to try and fight the threat off. This can manifest as a physical or verbal alteration, or it can be accomplished by an intense anger feeling. When we experience the fight response, our brain is trying to ward off the danger by defending it and defeating it. If the danger is real, it can be overcome with physical strength. This can be an effective tool to keeping us safe. But when the perceived danger or fear is not actually a threat, this can get us into a lot of trouble. So when I break these things down, you are going to identify how these things can help us win against danger, but can also, the spirit of fear, that's in the natural, but the spirit of fear, how it can control us in the spirit and stop us from actually going forward. Because when a perceived danger or fear that is not actually a threat, when this comes into our life, spirit of fear, it can get us in trouble. Because we are scared or fearful of an outcome of something that we can overreact at, scream at, shout at, or fight with people that we love. Look, let me just throw COVID into the mix for you, because if I touch on COVID, when I touch on all four of these things, you will realise why our nation, as most of the world, is taking all different approaches to a perceived threat that is coming into our world. Because COVID, the fear of COVID can bring an overreaction. But don't get too excited if you like that, because the fear of COVID can also bring an underreaction. Because we've got the fight and then we've got the flight. But let me break it down for you, because it'll make a whole lot more sense. Listen, let me give you an example here. An overreacting is people fighting with the police, or the police fighting with people, or angry with people, or people that are angry are looting shops and burning stuff down because of COVID. I don't know how looting and fighting with the police helps anybody when they're scared of what's happening with COVID. But that is an overreaction. That is the part of your brain that says, I'm going to fight this thing. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm going to get down, and we're not going to take it. We're not going to take this by ourselves. We're not going to take this thing down. We're going to beat this thing. That is the fight part when fear comes into our lives. Now, let me give you a more close example to parents. Many of us are parents here, okay? Here is a perceived danger. Parents screaming at their kids because they might go near the road, or they might go near the water. Now you say, well, hang on a minute, Mark, that's keeping them safe. Listen, work with me, all right? They're not on the road and they're not in the water. But I have seen parents see their kids go near the road or go near the water, and all hell breaks loose. It's like, what are you doing? Get away from the water. You're going to die. Move back. And then they're freaking out. Don't go near the road. And it's like they have just completely lost the plot in what's actually happening when this child is getting near the road or near the water. It was as if they had drowned or been hit by a car. Because when fear comes into your life, and the fight part of you as a parent, mums and dads, happens to us all. Okay, I'm not picking on anyone. I do the same thing. We all get into that fight mode, and we fight for the safety of our kid. We do not want it anywhere near that water or that road, just in case something happens. And we overreact because we're in the fight mode. We overreact by screaming and shouting and fighting with people that we love, because we're scared that this could go wrong, even though it hasn't gone wrong. It could go wrong, and therefore we start to fight out of fear of what could happen. Now, as an example, that helps us see what's happening both in the world as it does in parents. But you know what? If couples are fighting over the potential loss of money that they may not have, or a job that they could lose, or finance that could run out, and there's arguments, and there's fighting in the house, and then there's separation, and then it's like, well, I'm not going to be married to you anymore over something that was a perceived danger, it's not necessarily the right way to go forward. And if it's fear, do a budget. If it's a spirit of fear, you're now getting divorced in case it happens. And that's what happens all around the world when that spirit of fear comes into people, and all of a sudden the enemy comes to rob, kill, and destroy, and mess up a whole bunch of relationships and a whole bunch of things because of a perceived fear, not the actual fear. It is the fight part of us. A perceived fear that moves into fight mode will only bring disunity, a real lack of peace. It'll destroy your home, and it'll give you mental health issues because of a perceived fear that hasn't even happened. And when you can't divide the natural from the spirit of fear, then you can often go down this track, and these things can go south really, really quick. Because remember, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but he gave us a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. Second thing is this, I'll move through these quick. The next one is flight. If our brain does not feel like it can successfully fight off the danger, it may decide to try and escape, to trigger the flight response. Essentially, this response involves trying to get people as far away from the danger or the dangerous situation as quickly as possible. If the danger is something that can be outrun, then the flight response can be activated in our brain without us even choosing it, because it just pops up. When we perceive fear or danger that is not actually a threat, this can also get us in trouble. Let me give you a list. We quit good jobs because of what might happen. We get out of there before it does. We struggle to go to work because of what might happen when we get there. We leave our marriages because we think something's gone wrong. We drink too much or rely on drugs to try and cope with what's actually really happening. We don't go out. We don't go on holidays. We stay at home. We don't go to church. We don't give. We withhold. We just go back and we get out of the way. And do you know what happens? This has happened to our nation and happened to our churches when people got scared of COVID, and I bring that up a few times tonight. People some have fought it. They went out there and they burnt something down and they took on the police. Other people just went back into their homes. Same fear, spirit of fear. Some went out and fought. Some just went back and hid. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to church in case I catch it. I'm not going here in case I get it. I'm not going there in case I get it. I don't want to stay in my job in case I get it. And the flight mode is just as powerful, activated by the spirit of fear. It's just a different reaction, but the same spirit that brings it to us. So one time we're fighting, and another person will just hide. One time we're doing this, the next time we're doing that. And remember what I said about COVID. If the fear of COVID can bring an overreaction, that's fight. But COVID fear can also bring a flight reaction, that's stay at home, shut the borders, everybody do nothing, no one leave town, and the government goes into a hiding mode in case they're scared of what COVID might do. So it's a flight response, not a fight response. And the problem that we've seen over the last couple of years, and we've seen it on national television played out to us all, that at different times, the government's deciding to fight, and then they're deciding to flight. In different times with the spirit of fear comes around us. Sometimes we want to fight against what's happening, and we hurt loved ones without any real reason to do it. Other times we just hide. And we don't want to go anywhere, and we just want to get out of our job and not turn up to work, and we're scared of what could happen, even though the danger may or may not be real. That's where the spirit of fear really does its damage, on perceived danger, not actual danger. That's the spirit of fear, not the natural, I'm going to save myself for that. Now, let me get on to the next one. I'll just real quick. Freeze. Here's the third one. Most people know fight or flight. But do you know the spirit can also, the brain can also take you to a third area, which is freeze. It's frozen, okay? And this is another response, is freezing. Although, where it stems from is this. If we stay very still and very quiet until the danger passes, some people with extreme anxiety and extreme places where this, is really awkward, or it's an anxiety-provoking situation. For example, it may be a place at work, it may be giving an announcement, it may be public speaking. They just freeze. That's why you give some people the microphone, and public speaking is the number one fear in the world, and they get the microphone and they just go. I mean, they can talk fine when they're down there. They can talk fine in the car. You ask their husband or wife, they can talk fine anywhere. But you put a microphone and there's people watching, and the spirit of fear, they're not fighting and they're not flighting. They're frozen. And it's a medical thing, which is the third response to fear, where you just freeze. This is what it says. I Googled this up. Their vocal cords become paralyzed due to fear, and they are unable to speak until the anxiety has passes. You ever heard of frozen in fear? That's where it comes from. This is the brain's attempt to avoid detection and to get predators to move on by staying very, very still until the threat goes away. This fear response shuts down the body's ability to move, causing the person to literally be frozen or stuck until the fear passes. You know where we see this one the most? In the movie Jurassic Park. Anybody ever seen that? And the dinosaur comes in, and they've gone through the fight. We're going to kill this thing. It didn't work. Then they say, let's run because this thing's going to eat us. So they bolt. And then they're in the kitchen, and they're in the cupboard, and the dinosaur's creeping around the corner, and they are just frozen. They're not fighting. They're not flighting. They're just frozen in fear. And many people know what that's like when it comes to public speaking and things like that. But remember what I said about COVID? COVID can bring an overreaction, fighting. COVID can bring a flight reaction. Everybody stay home, shut the borders, nobody go anywhere. But COVID can also bring a frozen reaction where people just do nothing and hope it just all goes away. And when we watch our government, this happens multiple times. We've seen them fight, we've seen them flight, and we've seen them frozen, and they just don't know what to do. But as you enter into 2020 and you start to identify to some of these responses to fear, especially when the enemy is bringing that fear into our life, you don't want to fight and hurt the loved ones. You don't want to run and just avoid doing anything anywhere, and don't go to church and don't serve and don't give and don't do anything in case the whole thing falls apart. But you also don't want to be frozen and just do nothing and hope that the threat goes away. Because all of these things don't take us forward. This last one I'm going to throw out at you, and then we'll get the band to come. But when you're frozen, you don't have a go at that new business idea. When you're frozen, you don't take the chance with that job change. When you're frozen, you don't use your wealth to invest because you're scared that it might all go away. Remember the guy with the talents? The one that froze and did nothing, God was unpleased with? He wanted people to invest their money and get a return on their money, not freeze. All in there. When you freeze, you don't make a commitment to marriage. You just stay single and hope the person's going to hang around for long enough. There's no commitment because you're frozen in case the marriage is the wrong way to go. You don't have kids in case they're too hard to look after, which they are. But if you freeze, you'll never have any. We just stop trying to have a go. We stop serving in the church. We do very little. We do just enough to get through the day. or just enough to get through the year. Who wants to do another year when we just get through? You see, the spirit of fear is the thing that stops us. When we get into the spirit of fear and we freeze, that is when we just don't do anything. And I refuse to run a church in 2020 where the church is caught in the spirit of fear, where it just freezes. You know, there may be a bit of fighting, there may be a bit of flighting, but I tell you what, I definitely don't want to be frozen. I don't want to just do nothing just in case something goes wrong. Let me give you the fourth one, then we're done. I know it's a long message, but trust me, this will help you a lot. The fourth reaction to fear is flaunt. Now, I asked Cherie about it. She goes, I've never heard of it. I thought that was a baby deer. It's not what this is, but I understand it was pretty close. Flaunting is a response to fear when the brain decides to please the person who is triggering the fear response to prevent them from causing more harm. The response is common in survivors and in trauma. You might try to avoid abuse by keeping the abuser as happy as possible. This can manifest as being complacent, but it's all to avoid being hurt. If someone complies with their aggressor to reduce the risk of physical harm, they are not consenting to the abuse. Their brain is simply trying to keep them as safe as possible in a bad situation. This is where people's lives can be ruined with guilt, and the world around them in their life can be full of fear. There are many men and women that struggle with this area all throughout their life because of things that they did when they were young, things that were done to them when they were young, things that were done to them when they were children by an abusive partner or family members, sexual harassment, school bullying, bad bosses, Jezebel spirit, controlling and manipulating people and spirits. Flaunting is a fear response when the brain decides to please whoever is triggering that fear in a response to hope that it will protect them from being caused any more harm. You want to know the COVID example? COVID can bring an overreaction, fighting. COVID can bring a flight reaction, hide, shut the borders, stay at home. COVID can bring a freeze reaction. Don't do anything and just hope it all goes away. But the flaunt reaction is the vaccine rollout. Let's work with it. Let's keep everyone safe. Let's just keep COVID in its right spot so it doesn't do any more harm. And when you start to understand the 4 reactions to the spirit of fear, not only can we see them in our own lives and how they've affected us, but they've also affected our government. Listen, whatever your opinion is about the government or about the world system with what's happening in COVID, I guarantee you that each decision has been based out of one of those reactions from fear. Burn everything down. We're not going to be told what to do. We'll take you on. Everybody stay home. Shut the borders. We're not going anywhere. These are people that are making decisions that are scared of what could happen. Freezing. Let's just do nothing. It'll just go away. Just don't talk about it. Just avoid the whole situation. It'll pass on. Everything always does. Frozen. Do nothing about it. Or we come into the fawning, where it's simply, let's work with it. Let's make sure it's not too bad. Let's make sure, although we can't get rid of it, we work with it and minimize the harm. Now, when that happens to people that have been abused and people that have been sexually assaulted, whether young or whatever has happened that I read out before, when you get caught in that spirit, your mind has just reacted to go in that direction. And it doesn't just paralyze. You don't come out fighting. You don't running away from it. You're not frozen. You're just like, how do I work with this? And now you're older and those things have happened to you. You feel so guilty about it. If a man, I can't believe I let that person do that. I can't believe I let that boss treat me like that. I can't believe that I let him do that to me. I can't believe that I accepted that rape, or I did this, or I did that, or I let that person do this, or let that. But why didn't I stop it? Listen, you can't control how your brain reacts when that spirit of fear comes in. When people get scared, they will always choose one of those 4 options to get away from the danger, or to work with the danger, or minimize the danger as quick as possible. All of them can be used for good, but all of them can be used for bad. You know, this year, we need to put aside all of the spirit of fear. We need to get rid of the spirit of fear and realize that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. Because fight, flight, freeze, and fawn responses are chosen so quickly, we are typically not able enough to stop and think about it to make a better decision with the response of the danger that we're facing. And when this happens, our brain just simply takes over. And unfortunately, it means that most of the time we make the wrong decision to the threat that we perceive is there, whether real or not.